I always tell people that carp are just like grizzly bears. They'll eat just about anything. In fact, that's one of the things that makes them a great game fish. I'd have to say that around here we catch most of our carp on nymph-type patterns, and certainly carp do eat lots of mayfly nymphs, caddis larvae, and other nymphs like damsels and dragons. Certainly hare's ears and pheasant tails will work. In fact, one of our favorites is this soft hackle pheasant tail that we call a trophy nymph. Another favorite is this net builder caddis larva. We often fish this fly in larger sizes, say a number 8 or 10, to imitate the crane flies, true flies, and other grub-like critters so abundant in our waters. Yet another is this half-back nymph, another buggy-looking nymph that the carp just seem to love. Dave Whitlock's red squirrel nymph has also proven itself as a good nymph and emerger pattern. We've had especially good luck on this beadhead rubber-legged version. Whit's damsel is also a favorite of ours during the summer months. I have to tell you that my favorite carp fly of all time is Jim Andrix's little bugger. This is an extremely simple fly of rabbit fur and ostrich herl that we fish in brown, black, olive, and white. Quite frankly, I've caught more carp on the beadhead brown little bugger than any other fly. Granted, I do fish it more, but I fish it with confidence. You originally created this to be a tadpole imitation? Or?
Right, tied it in black with just a little bit of lead wire to counteract the flotation of, the material. And for bluegills, to imitate tadpoles, baby catfish, even little bass that are just hatched. And it worked pretty well, and then I'd fish it in streams and was doing pretty good with it. And then, of course, then I resisted putting beads on it. At the time, beads weren't fly fishing to me. And
right.
I think a lot of guys went through that. And so I finally put beads on it, and not just increased the effectiveness. Incredible.
Well, I find it real important to have the beaded version, the unbeaded version in my arsenal for covering different depths.
I even tie some with tungsten in this quarry where we've been searching. The water drops off so quickly, and sometimes we spot fish that are 6 foot down, and a beadhead just is too slow.
Two other nymph-type patterns should always be found in a carper's box. The first of which is Bob Clauser's swimming nymph, a great all-around, buggy-looking nymph/streamer fly that was recommended by all the anglers that we fish with. In fact, I believe it was the top recommendation in the book Carp on the Fly. And last but not least, the mighty San Juan worm. Carp do eat a lot of annelids, or aquatic worms and leeches, and you should never be without these in a variety of colors. As far as surface feeding carp go, they will at times feed on emergent, adult, and spent aquatic insects like mayflies and caddisflies. They especially like the burrowing type mayflies like the brown drakes and hexes when they hatch in the early summer. Now your basic adult and emergent type patterns that you would use for trout will work just fine here. Carp can also be found eating midges and tiny mayflies. Oftentimes this happens in a lake. Our favorite fly for this type is a Griffith's gnat. In fact, the Griffith's gnat is the only fly I've been able to hook those type of feeders on. But when you do it, better have a stout hook and some strong 6X tippet. Carp will also feed off the surface on certain seeds, and we carry a simple CDC cottonwood seed pattern. This is a must-have for mid-spring or when these seeds are found on your waters. We have occasionally caught carp on these even when the seeds were not present. And let's not forget Jim's IV fly. Grass carp, and all carp, of course, love grass and vegetation, and fished correctly, this fly can definitely expand your horizons. I think it's safe to say that carp love crayfish, and good patterns are a must.
I guess for catching really big carp consistently over the years, I've had my best luck on this fly I call near enough crawfish, and the way I've tied it, it hits the water and sinks pretty quickly, but it doesn't make a great deal of noise, and it's a relatively quiet fly, and and it just kind of jigs along the bottom with the hook up.
Right.
And boy, big old carp will come right over and get all over that.
You can see the mayfly nymphs all over the underside of this rock. There's a caddis case. There we go. I don't know my mayflies very well, so I couldn't name them for you, but it looks like there's a couple, 2 or 3 different species here. So what the carp, they don't necessarily turn these big rocks over, but they can move the smaller stuff and break free a lot of these, and they just filter the water and they get their nymphs. And then if they get lucky, they get them a crayfish, which they dearly love.
I had found so many, when I did carpetopsies, found so many invertebrates in them, particularly crayfish and leeches and snails and caddis larvae and mayfly nymphs. And so that told me in a hurry that these guys just aren't eating crud off the bottom. They're, you know, they're active foragers.
Yeah, like everybody has said for years, that you know, they really do eat things that are alive.
Yeah.
Well, let's go fishing.
Okay, but you got to give me my crawfish back first. You thought you were going to get that, didn't you?
With most of my crayfish patterns, I tie with bead chain or lead eyes, but generally bead chain because I'm fishing such shallow water that extra weight isn't necessary. But what it helps do is right the fly so the hook rides up. And because the hook rides up, when a carp takes it, the first thing he gets a hold of is that hook in his top lip. And that helps with those sensitive takes that they do sometimes when you don't feel it.
Another one of our favorite crayfish patterns is McCabe's crayfish. George McCabe is a legendary carp fisherman from northern Ohio, and he supposedly developed this fly specifically for carping. Glowbugs aren't mentioned as a carp fly very often, but we've recently been hearing a lot about their success for carp. Interesting fishing with you guys today as you guys were fishing glowbugs. You know, a standard traditional steelhead fly, and I was fishing the old standby you know, little bugger and damselfly nymphs, and eventually I switched over to the egg fly and caught some fish today. What's up with that?
I use it exclusively now. I've tried everything, nymphs, you know, all the usual stuff, crayfish patterns, but I found that the glowbug is absolutely the best fly for the carp.
That's something you don't read and don't hear about very often. You were doing the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know it was such a big secret or anything like that. I think, you know, the glowbug is effective for a couple different reasons. It has a nice controlled sink rate. You know, it sinks very slowly through the water, and I think the fish get a really good chance to see the fly and inspect it, and it's nice and soft. When they take it in, they seem to hold on to it. I don't know exactly what they take it for. Maybe they think it's a berry or something that's fallen in the river, or some other, you know, piece of food like that. I know in this river here, a lot of the bait fishermen use corn, and I think the fish get kind of tuned into feeding on the corn. So
yeah, that makes sense.
You know, an Oregon cheese-colored glowbug, you know, looks like a piece of corn. So that might be one of the reasons that it works. But white works, you know, pale colors like peach, things like that. I wouldn't use real bright colors, but hey, the glowbug's a great fly.
Well, that sure proved it today. I mean, we hooked, what, 6, 7 fish, and I think all but one was on the glowbug.
Bottom line is, there's all kinds of carp flies, and there's thousands of flies that'll work that we haven't mentioned here. Flies like woolly buggers and clouser minnows should never be ignored. In fact, a good carp box should have just as many or maybe even more flies than a good trout box. Oops, I almost forgot my favorite carp fly, the mulberry. In late spring and early summer, mulberries and other berries ripen and fall into the water. If there's carp in the area, they'll congregate under these bushes and gorge themselves on mulberries. They feed with reckless abandon, and at times 2 or 3 fish will charge the fly when it hits the water. This has become my favorite way to carp fish. In fact, I set aside the whole month of June for fishing mulberries. The flies that we use are really super simple. They're basically loops of black or purple chenille all the way up the hook. It's actually the same fly as a sucker spawn or scrambled egg for those of you that are familiar with steelhead fishing. It is just simply tied with chenille instead of Angora yarn or bug yarn. We usually tie them on a number 10 or 12 short shank heavy wire hook. There's other versions of berry flies as well, like Dave Whitlock's deer hair berry. We've even used Jim's little bugger in the black color in a pinch. A few years ago, we invited Dave Whitlock to join us for some of the phenomenal mulberry fishing in our area.
All right, Dave. Mulberry, perfect. That's the old mulberry tree. Well, I'll tell you though, you really got to hold them soft.
They don't.
Look at that. Yeah. Also take that slime right off your hand, and you smell as sweet as a baby's butt.